How can an optical transmission, power cable, and electronics manufacturer sell to data centers? So your company provides optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics manufacturing to data centers. So my first question, and if you've heard me answer similar questions before, largely comes down to figuring out, do data centers typically buy all three of these product lines from your company? Does a single data center often buy optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics from your company? Or are these distinctly different kinds of data center companies that you're selling to? I can't answer that. That's a question more at your go-to-market strategy sales level based on your historical data. But if you look at what I could answer if I was looking at your website, is I could often look at your website navigation and see how you're segmenting your different lines of business and if they lead to similar kinds of calls to action or different calls to action. Another thing that I might be able to infer from your website is that if I look at your solutions pages and specifically your case studies, and I look and see, is a single kind of client often talking about the benefits of your optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics? Or are these lines of business typically talked about in different case studies? If you have three different categories of customers, you potentially need three different go-to-market playbooks. And you'll have three different ideal client profiles, and you'll have different buyer personas that are part of each one of those ideal client profiles. If we find when we look at your website segmentation approach, and especially if we look at your use cases, case studies of where you've been most successful, if we find that the same clients are buying optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics from your company, then it becomes a lot simpler. And we have a single go-to-market playbook, and we have marketing and sales and customer success. It can largely be one person or one kind of person or one kind of team, as opposed to being segmented along different lines of business. So it dramatically impacts how you do onboarding, how you do territory management, how you figure out the media that you want to get in front of, how you invest in educational content and events and sales acceleration, how you manage your sales team, whether you have different pipelines in your CRM, different forecasts. Are there different unit economics for each of these? Is there a different cost of acquisition? Is there a different lifetime value? If there's recurring, it sounds based on the nature of your business, it's probably not recurring revenue. But if there was, are there different monthly and annual recurring revenues? More than likely, you're looking at an average order value, an annual customer value, or lifetime value, or something like that. But do each of these lines of businesses have vastly different unit economics, or are they all relatively similar in terms of cost of client acquisition, lifetime value, sales cycle length, margins? That informs to a large degree how separately versus how similarly you tend to manage and resource these. So if you're looking for how you can sell to data centers, a lot of it largely comes down to is, do you want to be perceived as a commodity provider, or do you want to be perceived as the go-to experts in your space when it comes to anything and everything having to do with optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics? If you want to be a commodity provider, keep doing what you've been doing for the last 10, 20 years and focus on doing it better, faster, and cheaper than everyone else. If you want to be competitive in today's data center related marketplace, recognize that most of your buyers are now craving a self-propelled buyer's journey. And this accelerated in the first couple of years of this decade when so many people were working from home and continue to work from home. We just aren't spending nearly as much time with salespeople in a mid-market enterprise B2B context as we were 10 years ago. And as a result, people's expectations are very, very different. Gartner found, like, for example, 83% of a typical journey is over before sales contact. It used to be like 56%. And we think that's just going to continue to accelerate. So what that means is it puts a bigger obligation on your sales team to deliver more value than they ever have in the past. They can't really show up anymore as a transaction-focused salesperson who's reading information that they can find on your website. They really need to show up as teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, and trusted advisors. So it's a different kind of person that you're hiring into, like an account executive or sales development role, or a different kind of training, or a different kind of a radical makeover or repositioning, because those individuals really need to look a lot more like Big Four consultants and diagnosticians more than someone that's just focused on closing a deal. Which means that what they spend time on, sales professionals need to be prepared to come in and participate much earlier in the journey than they ever have in the past. And marketers also, conversely, need to be prepared to stay with the sales team much deeper into the journey than they ever have in the past. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting you and your company in as early as possible and as often as possible, so you can participate in as many of those 28 touch points between stranger and purchase decision as possible. The better job you can do that, the more you can have a significant impact on how these prospects and clients evaluate anything and everything having to do with optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics. And a lot of this comes down to, once you understand the buyer personas, doing the actual buyer persona research, so you understand in their own words what their biggest goals are and what their challenges are. And that informs your entire approach to building out educational content resources and events, both in person and virtual events that support all of this, so that your prospects and clients want to spend time with your team, as opposed to you chasing them all the time and having to beg for time on their calendar. When you can get it so they want to spend time with you because you're adding so much value to their professional life, the context completely changes. And that's when they become a lot more open to not only you answering their questions, but advising them on what others in similar job functions and similar kinds of companies have gone through as they've navigated trying to get to close the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and understanding and inferring and recommending next steps, almost as if you're like a human version of a large language model that anticipates what someone wants to know next. And that's how you make sure that you dramatically shape the criteria that they use to evaluate all their options. That's how you ensure nearly guaranteeing that you're on the short list. And when you do this at a world-class elite level, many times you can do this so well, your resources, your events knock out a lot of competitive forces, so you can get to the decision stage of the journey. And you may discover that the short list has collapsed down to your company. That's it. So you won before. There's someone in the industry that talks about like winning before they get to search, winning before they actually go and look for the product. And that's essentially what you need to do. Is the brand loyalty, the affinity for spending time with members of your team needs to be so exceptionally high, so world-class, so elite, that you have won in the awareness and the consideration stage before they get to sales contact. And the reality is, because your salespeople are no longer seen like transaction-focused salespeople, there's none of this nonsense with them playing cat and mouse type of games of misstating and misrepresenting and not telling who else is on the decision committee and what the real goals are and what the real budget is, what the real time. All of that evaporates when you're able to show up as the trusted advisor and the consultant. So when it comes to how an optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics manufacturer sells to data centers, all of this should be taken into account. Oh, and one final caveat too. I often see in this category that a significant amount of companies completely punt all of this down to intermediaries, down to channel partners, down to distributors, down to manufacturers, reps. And that can be a solution. The challenge with making it 100% of your solution is many times you're missing out on incredibly valuable insights that you would get by having your own team members spend a lot more time with prospects and clients. Some of your channel partners, some of your distributors, some of your manufacturer reps may share that insight with you, but a lot of them may not even care about capturing it because it really doesn't impact what they're trying to do for their particular business model. In other words, their business model objectives may be quite different than yours, and it can be a big mistake to assume that, one, they're working 100% on your account all the time, which would be ridiculous because they're more than likely juggling multiple lines of business, multiple clients, multiple manufacturers that they have competing responsibilities for. But even if they are 100% dedicated to you, there's multiple competing priorities of where they spend their time and what their loyalties look like. So if you're at the end of the day, by not having these direct relationships with prospects and clients, or at least not participating in developing and creating and iterating over time these educational resources and events, you're missing out on an enormous opportunity to shape what the future of your company looks like. So it's not that these intermediate indirect models can't be successful. It's just recognize that the cost of doing it a lot of times is much higher than you realize. Many times people find it appealing because they're shifting from fixed overhead to variable overhead. But the real cost in doing that is you may miss out on enormous insights that your competitors are getting because they're closer to the end clients, they're closer to the target accounts, they're closer to the buyer persona. So all of these are considerations that you should be thinking about as an optical transmission, power cabling company, electronics manufacturer that sells to data centers. At the end of the day, we need to get found by the right people in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context, so that you and your team members are seen as elite, world-class go-to experts on anything and everything having to do with optical transmission, power cabling, and electronics manufacturing for data centers.